definitely appreciate the work that you've been doing, and I
Well,
look
thank
forward to
you.
hearing more. Definitely, definitely. It's an honor. For the viewers who may not recognize you, could you let them know who you are, where you from, and what do you do?
I'm Professor David Uttal. I teach at Northwestern University, just outside Chicago. I run a lab called STAR, which stands for Spatial Transformation and Reasoning. And we are interested in how people think about spatial relations and how that applies to learning the sciences and mathematics and engineering. And we try to understand it and help improve it.
Wow, okay, that definitely sounds interesting. Now I can ask you, when did you develop this passion for psychology? Is this something that you've always been interested in, or did you kind of get into it later in life?
Well, let me start with my passion for the particular topic, is because I realized late in high school that psychology was a way to study what I was interested in. And so when I was 13 years old, everybody believes this can't be true, but it is. I got lost on a Boy Scout hike, and I was lost for over 2 days. And although I never thought that it led me to study that, it seems like it's too odd to be a coincidence. Maybe somehow I was motivated to study navigation and spatial learning because I myself was a victim of bad navigation. Obviously, I was fine, but it was a harrowing 2 days for me and certainly for my parents. But here I am. And then in college, I didn't know anything about social science, and I started taking classes, just things that were required to get distribution credits, and it really paid off because I started to learn that you could study some of these social issues scientifically. And I got most interested in psychology and pursued it, and I've been doing it ever since 1983. Wow. So, yeah, a long time ago.
Wow, that's truly amazing. You've been doing this longer than, a lot of people been living.
Yes,
Now I wanted to ask,
that's called being old.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Go ahead.
yeah, yeah. But you good at it. You great at it. You one of the best. Now I'm a world traveler myself. I've been to about 70 countries, and I find myself getting lost a lot. So I take a lot of pictures of different little I guess like little signs or restaurants so I can kind of backtrack my way. Because even with the
Right.
GPS, I still, lose track of where I came from. Now, go ahead.
Well, GPS, of course, has changed everything. That you're wise to not rely totally on GPS and to think about the need to find where you're going, because, like, most people get lost, don't realize that they're getting lost until they are lost. So keep being aware of the possibility is a big step towards preventing it. We can talk some about GPS and how it's changed navigation just so dramatically. It's one of those.
Yeah, yeah.
It's one of those human skills. Navigation may be a human skill that we're sort of losing through lack of use. And there's been several studies now that have shown that people who rely a lot on GPS actually are worse at navigating without GPS, and that makes sense. But to actually see it, see a decline in abilities that used to be really important is, you know, it's interesting. I mean, technology and human thinking have always been intertwined. So I'm not like, I don't think it's like a terrible, horrible thing, but it is noteworthy that we're getting worse at navigation in some ways. I mean, as long as you have the GPS and it's got a good charge and you got the maps downloaded, then you're okay. But you know, things can go wrong, and like you said, it's not always perfect, and it doesn't always uh, tell you when to turn and things like that. And we forget that those maps are not part of the GPS. All the GPS does is tell you where you are on Earth and update that continuously. Then you need this sort of separate software that downloads the maps and puts that point on the map. So you really, either you need to have a connection to the internet at all times, which is not always possible, or you need to think ahead and download the maps so you're prepared to go. And many times people find, my phone won't work, I'm lost. So it's still a problem. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. You made an important point. Like you say, navigation is a skill, and the more we rely on technology, we, I guess, have some type of atrophy. Like with my handwriting, is declining, so I have to go out of my way to make sure I practice my handwriting and my signature. So I don't completely lose it. Due to
Yeah. I
the
mean,
advancement in technology.
similar arguments were made when calculators became popular. I remember like the day I got my first calculator, it cost $49 back in the 1970s. So that was quite expensive. Now I don't even know if you could buy one because they're on cell phones, but people were so worried that we're going to lose our ability to do mathematics. And I guess maybe we are worse at doing it by paper, pencil, or in our head. But if we always have the tool handy, it does free up our minds to do perhaps more interesting or creative things. So there is a bonus to putting some of these everyday tasks into technology as long as you have the technology to. I mean, go all the way back to reading. It wasn't until like 500-600 years ago that literacy became common. And before that, you'd have to, before the printing press, you'd have to go to a scribe and have it copied by hand, and extremely expensive, extremely time consuming. And even then people were worried that we're going to lose the ability to talk to each other if we all we have to do is read and things. And so this has been a pattern as technologies emerge that facilitate cognition. People often worry that the underlying abilities may disappear, but I just like to see it as a trade-off. But yeah, it is kind of scary. Like my daughters grew up in the GPS age, and I'll never forget. Like she may not want to hear this, but she was driving one day and she called and she said she was lost, and I was like, "Well, what town are you in?" And she didn't know. And I said, "Well, what do you see?" And she would just say, like, "I see like a church," but she couldn't like put herself into a particular place. So it wasn't just the navigation that was lost; it was the whole sense of place, and that sort of worries me a little bit because we're very tied to the places that we live in and create. And it's just like everything they say about the phone, you're just kind of going through life without actually engaging. And so that's a difference. It's like I usually know what Chicago suburb I'm in at a given time, and I'm aware of the streets and things like that, and that just wasn't part of their lives. And so it's interesting, but they're doing fine. So
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I appreciate you sharing that. Now I wanted to ask you about the Star Lab. If you could talk about what do you actually do in the lab? Is it like a traditional classroom, or is it like a laboratory, or is it something else?
it's the Star Lab itself is a laboratory that's designed specifically for testing children. So there's like a waiting room where the parents and kids can wait and feel comfortable. And then there's a large room where we do our spatial cognition testing. There's a couple of smaller rooms where we can do experiments that don't require large space, and it varies like depending on what we do. I've done lots of studies of map reading and how people make the sense of direction judgments even in the laboratory. We also do studies of what are called geographical information systems, or GIS, which is different from GPS. If, in terms of your mind and brain, GIS is good and GPS is bad. So GIS is layering of maps and ways of representing spatial data. And we and others have shown that using that actually can facilitate spatial reasoning. So technology is not all bad. Um, like you might not know what GIS is, but you see it every day. If you're on Facebook, Instagram, I just one example of the fires in LA. They're using a lot of maps that are they can construct on the fly, and it helps them to make decisions about where to put fire lines, and given limited water, where they might be able to make the most difference and things like that. And that's the firefighters, people who are managing it, can do that in real time because they have all of the data about the streets and the uh, water precipitation and brushes and hills and everything. It's all there already, and then they can just layer the information that they get about the fire on top of that. So they're trying to predict things like who needs to evacuate next. And it's a difficult decision because you don't want people to evacuate if they don't have to, but on the other hand, if you wait too long, it can be too late. So um, the spatial reasoning in the maps, it's a really good example of both the critical role that spatial reasoning plays and the representations. Another example in the elections that, we layer like every county or even below the county level, and people are trying to understand where is the vote coming on. There's one of my favorite people. I don't know if you watch Steve Kornacki on MSNBC, but he's always on when there's an election, and he's really good with geography. In fact, I think he may know every county in the United States. I don't know that for a fact, but he seems to be able to come up with that information whenever he needs it without looking. So part of that is just having access to the basic information and then layering the results as they come in. So he can say, okay, it looks like this candidate's going to win because 80% of the vote is in, and in these areas, what's left is tending to vote for the person who's already winning. So we can go ahead and project, again, we may not think of those as spatial, but they really are. And the maps and the GIS tools really matter. So a lot of our work now is like on the promise of GIS for learning and thinking and reasoning. It's an emerging like job career for people. It's used not, I gave these examples in emergency services and voting, but real estate, somewhat more mundane things like, marketing, real estate, deciding where to put a new building, deciding if like zoning issues. So what would happen if we change things here, if we allow, for example, more higher density housing? How could we expect that to change the population, and how would that change things like demands for parking and use of natural park facilities? And like all these things are going to be affected, and we like to think about that as a spatial distribution, and so GIS allows us to do that.
Wow. Okay, that's some important information. I appreciate you
It's
breaking that down.
it's everywhere. You couldn't. It's now one thing when after people listen to this, I would bet they would see 10 GIS created maps in the day if they're online anywhere. People use them all the time. Newspapers. I mean, everybody uses them all the time now. They just don't know what they're using. And I like to say, why not make this available to more people? It takes a little bit of training and learning. So does every computer technology. But once you get it, you really start to see things differently. So my students here at Northwestern, I teach a class called Mapping for Social Issues. And a lot of it has to do with inequities and in access to resources. So here in Chicago, we have a very sharp division between the North and the South Side. And the South Side tends to be less well served. And a really classic example is food deserts where there's not access to fresh food. And so we could map that out just to see it. And it really hits you dramatically. These people have, on the north side, you find 90% of people can walk to a place that sells fresh food. But on the south side, it's only like 30. I'm making these numbers up, but it's dramatic. It's like 30%. And then we can ask, okay, what are some ways that we could fix this? And so obviously, more stores, but they've tended not to do well. So you think about things that are less permanent. When one of those is farmers markets. And so the farmers from like Indiana and Michigan, Southern Illinois, can come and sell their vegetables and produce 1 or 2 days a week, and then leave. So it doesn't take building a whole new building. It just takes some access to electricity and water. And so we're looking for places that where this could make a difference. And could you actually affect people's access at a scale that would make a difference? We ask questions like that, and and during the COVID pandemic, we're trying to get vaccines out. Like how close do we have to have vaccine sites, and what about like going to mobile like vans and things to get into people's neighborhoods? Because it's just people who don't have cars and don't have easy access to transit may have trouble, particularly when a neighborhood drugstore is not in the neighborhood but could be miles away. So those kinds of things are really important. Try to help people
Wow.
think that way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great idea. What you mentioned about the farmers actually coming for maybe like say 1 or 2 days and then they're able to leave. I
Yeah,
never thought of that.
that's what a farmer's market generally is, and they like it because they can sell a lot quite quickly, and it's a way of getting of selling quite a lot in a short amount of time. So the farmers really like it. They're and interesting. The South Side is actually more accessible. It's quicker. You don't have to drive across the whole city. So they're very interested in markets on the South Side, and also markets now take SNAP cards. The uh, Department of Agriculture uh, uh, supports people who might need extra help to get food. And now the farmers markets can take those, so that makes it possible to reach people who otherwise might not be able to use it. So that's what I mean about equity. So trying to make things better for people through space and mapping.
Yeah, definitely. Because I didn't mention this, but I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio, and I'm an urban gardener myself. I started
Oh,
an urban garden in 2022. So we did the bees, we did the chickens, we did the fruits and vegetables. So I own about maybe 3 plots, and I've been trying to buy more plots, but I
that
I,
was
I
that
don't
was the
know if
other
somebody. Go ahead.
that's the other thing I didn't mention was the urban gardens. That's another neighborhood urban gardens is another possibility for actually making a difference. The question, of course, is scale. Is there enough land? Is there enough land with sunlight and enough water to make the investment worthwhile? Certainly for some it is, but is it, do we have a solution to the problem at scale? I don't know. It's a difficult question. People still working on it. If we could keep some of these supermarkets open in the neighborhoods, that would really help. But that's been hard, especially after
Yeah,
COVID.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. Okay, now I wanted to ask you about this. It was an article I was checking out from Forbes, and it talked about spatial thinking, and I guess it's saying why does it matter for students in school?
Hmm. I'm not familiar with that article, but I there are
Oh,
similar
okay. I thought
art.
it was.
Well, I'd
I'm
love to
sorry.
see
I
it.
thought it.
No, 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 no. I know the general themes is why does it matter for people in school? Let me give you two general reasons. First of all, it matters for STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. United States, I mean, this whole debate we've been having about the H-1B visas, the reason we need more H-1B visas or that we have the H-1 visa is largely about STEM jobs. And because we don't have enough Americans who are qualified, uh, we bring in people from foreign countries. And I know there's economic and political debates, but that's why we have them. And if we want more Americans, then we have to have people who are qualified to do pretty high level STEM. And spatial skills strongly predict performance in mathematics and some other spatial. So you're thinking visually and you're thinking about things, and a lot of people just aren't used to doing that. It's not taught systematically in school, and so we kind of just take it as either you're born with it or you're lucky enough to get taught, but not really systematically teaching it. So that's the first reason. And the second reason is that, as we're moving away, that was like high level STEM, but we can also consider more jobs that involve working with your hands, but high level trades like carpentry, plumbing, electrician. Those are very spatial in nature. And We need people to, those jobs are becoming increasingly popular and increasingly economically attractive. And so we're starting to see, particularly amongst, I don't know whether to say boys or men, like 17, 18-year-olds are making decisions about uh, going to college that a generation ago they wouldn't have made. They would have just say, I have to go to college. And now they see alternatives, but those alternatives require that you be able to do spatial reasoning. So those are two reasons why it matters in school.
Okay, okay. Now I can ask you. We're about 21 minutes in, so I'm gonna have maybe like one more question.
Okay.
Have you written any books on any of these subjects in particular, or have you considered, doing maybe a documentary?
Oh, that's a great idea. I was in a documentary. I was in graduate school for about 5 minutes, but my field is not one that we tend to write a lot of articles and not many books. I would love to do that. That's one of my goals for the latter part of my career, and I really really think it would be important. And if you're a documentary would be a fantastic idea. And Netflix and Prime are so full of documentaries now, and they're often so fascinating. You can learn so much. So if you can help us with that, yeah, that's a great idea.
Okay, okay. Yeah, because definitely it's very interesting information. I know you done wrote a lot of journals and articles, but I guess sometimes, the average person, they may
Yeah.
not catch it, or,
No,
it may not be.
we've tried to get beyond just talking to other scientists, but you're absolutely right. And next year I have a sabbatical, and maybe that will be my major focus. I think we really need that. We've written articles for like teachers that have reached tens of thousands of people, and that's good. But you still need more than that. And thank you for that. I mean, you're motivating me. So good.
Likewise, likewise. So yeah, I want to thank you one more time for taking out the time to come on the
Oh,
podcast.
I've enjoyed it. You're doing this is great. These are kind of like small documentaries in a way. So, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, this is important information, and I'm sure the viewers have learned a lot, and it's important information. It's interesting as well,
keep up
and
the
I look
urban
forward to.
gardens.
Yeah, yeah,
Sustainability. You
definitely.
got to get the next. You got to think who's the next person who's going to take it over when somebody leaves. So to keep those things going is tricky. But yeah, community
Yeah,
action,
yeah.
community organization. It's very important